When I was 17 or so, two friends and I decided to camp in the field next to my housing estate so we could drink beer and listen to music as loud as we wanted. This was a huge grassy field on a slight hill, where all the surrounding houses were far enough away so we wouldn't disturb the neighbours. We also couldn't be seen by anyone unless they're extremely close to our tent. It became late, and my two friends had fallen asleep. I was having trouble sleeping around this time, so I laid there, awake. Around 3 AM, I heard the distinct sound of grass and vegetation as someone walked out on it outside of our tent. I was stunned with terror, for one, because this is a private field owned by a farmer who would probably be angry to find us there, but more so, I didn't hear anybody approaching. Just suddenly, somebody's outside the tent. I held my breath out of fear and shock, which is when I heard another set of footsteps belonging to a dog. Filled with dread, I just laid there as still as possible, breathing slowly and quietly, listening to the person and his dog walking back and forth outside the tent. I thought we were going to get shot or beaten. Then, I saw the guy's shadow. This freaked me out a lot more. It was huge, looming over us at every pass by our tent. I couldn't see the dog's shadow, even though I heard it making increasingly erratic circulations of our tent. This carried on for around 5 minutes, although it felt like much more time had passed. The shadows disappeared. The sounds faded away. They didn't leave or anything. It was more like they were walking outside of the tent, but somewhat lighter this time. When I was sure that the sounds had ceased, and there was no threat waiting outside, I freaked out and my friends, still as quiet as possible, and said that we had to go because somebody knew we were here and we could get in trouble with the owner. I told them everything that happened. They never believed me, thinking I dreamt it. I assured them I hadn't, and we had to leave right now. They tried to get me back to sleep, ignoring me because they're lazy as hell and didn't want to pack up everything and go. I gave up too, even though I knew that they'd never get to sleep. 10 minutes later, the sounds returned, just like the volume outside the tent had been turned up gradually. I felt the same sense of dread as before, and whispered one of my friends' names so they could wake up. Shh, one said. They already heard it, and told me to open the tent to see who was terrorizing us. I did so, slowly easing my hand out of my sleeping bag and up to the zipper. It probably took 5 minutes to reach it, just so I was sure not to make a sound, and pulled it down so violently I nearly ripped the whole thing in half. There was no one there. We got out within the space of 5 seconds. There was nobody anywhere. As I mentioned, we're atop a hill in the middle of a field, and so we could see anybody for miles. There was nothing. So this happened maybe 20 years ago, when 3 friends and I went camping at a Kentucky lake. So we had just settled on a campsite after hiking maybe an hour from where we parked. It was on a small inlet, maybe 300 yards long, 150 yards to the opposite shore. We had it to ourselves and camped near the U-bend of the inlet. so we had a limited view of the lake proper. We could see it to the left, but it was mostly blocked by the trees on the opposite side of the little bay. It being relatively hot and humid, we were all standing in the water after having set up our tents and such. The sun had gone down maybe an hour earlier, so there was still a little light left. I think it was early summer or late spring. So we're standing there shooting the breeze, up to our shoulders in water. It felt great. Suddenly, above us, there was a meteor-like fireball that lasted maybe 2 seconds at most. It appeared to be very close, but there was no way to be certain. We saw it fall behind the opposite spit of land, and presumably land in the lake. Immediately afterwards, the entire lake lit up, seemingly, from the bottom. Seriously, all the water visible from where we were standing, including our little inlet and the proportion of the lake proper, lit up like the entire floor of the lake. It was as if it was made out of spotlights. It flashed twice or 3 times and went out. There was no accompanying flash or sounds or whatsoever. A few seconds went by when one of the guys asks, "Alright, who else saw that?" Which was followed by an evening of us all theorizing what it could have possibly been. To this day, none of us have any idea what it was, but we all saw it. It's easily the most strange thing that I've ever seen in my life, and I'm probably never going to see it again. When I was younger, around 10 years old, I went camping with my family. I'll just get right into it. It's about 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. The tent me and my brother were in is really hot and very uncomfortable. Anyway, while I was trying to go to bed, I heard a very faint whimper. I tried to ignore it because I figured I was just tired. Our campsite was along a road with many other camps nearby. The whimper started to get louder and louder and turned into crying. I heard footsteps outside and a girl screaming. Now, let me tell you, it didn't get fainter or anything, it got louder and louder, remaining in the exact same spot the entire time. This is important because it indicates she was looking at us, crying. It gets worse though. It turns into a full scream for seconds straight, then cuts out. When she started screaming, my brother woke up. We both looked at each other and put our pillows over our head. Eventually the screaming stopped. I couldn't sleep at all that night, and when we got outside our tent, there were footprints everywhere. I was just glad that we were leaving the same day. Not necessarily camping, but in 1999, I was with some friends hunting deer in NW, Wisconsin. I'd just seen the Blair Witch Project a few weeks earlier. We each headed to our stands in pitch dark at about 5:30 AM. The woods were dead calm, no wind, no moon, and a light snow had fallen the night before. It meant it was pitch black. I walked alone in the dark, and when I got about 20 yards from my stand, a deafening scream shattered the silence. Not just once, but it kept on going. It sent shivers down my spine. I was terrified. It sounded like somebody crying and somebody slowly killing another person, but it went on for like 15 minutes. I grabbed my gun, headed up the ladder. Finally, it stopped. I didn't get down. I stayed up there, terrified. The thing is, No one else heard it. A couple of years ago, my brother brought a large piece of land out in the middle of nowhere, about 30 miles or so from cell reception. It's quiet, there's no light pollution, and no paved roads, and not a lot of people around. Shortly after he brought the place, two of my brothers, the landowner and another, me, and our family spent a weekend camping on the land, doing our very best to clear it up. People would use it as a dump. There were many downed trees, etc. On the second night we camped there, I awoken in the middle of the night to take a leak. As I walked to the bushes in the dark, I realized that I could faintly hear music in the distance. That didn't strike me as odd, because I knew my brother had a radio in his camper. I finished up and went back to sleep with no further thought on the matter. The next morning at breakfast, I mentioned the radio and music. Several other people recalled hearing music during the night, but no two people heard the same music. Finally, the brother who brought the radio woke up. I asked him about the music. He seemed a little bit freaked out. He woke up some time to go and smoke. He heard music as well and assumed it as somebody else. I should mention that he was the only one with a generator and a radio. It wasn't this radio that we heard, and it wasn't anybody else's either. I've been back there several times, but I'm a bit freaked out by the place at night. I have fun while I'm there, but I'm always armed and don't sleep in a tent anymore. I sleep in my SUV and lock the doors. It may sound kind of stupid, but realizing that everybody heard different music with nobody else around, no reception and no radios, electricity, that's creepy. I spent a lot of time camping, on the beach, in Yosemite, all over California really. But one particular Friday night, my friends and I decided to camp in the woods near Hicks Road, a notorious road for the fatal car accidents, squatters in abandoned homes, etc. This is about our third time camping up there. The last few times we heard some freaky noises, but nothing really awful. So we pitch it in a small clearing and plow through a taco 12-pack before we crash out. I fall asleep no problem and wake up to the sound of what seemed like people arguing outside of my tent. It's around 4:30 in the morning, and I stand up slowly and peek out into the darkness and just see a massive black mass move. Looking through our tents, I see there's about 7 of these giant masses. Once my eyes adjust, I finally know exactly what the hell they are. They're wild boar. I sat down in complete and utter silence for about an hour while I hear these 500-pound animals scrambling around the tent. So close that I actually hear them brushing on the fabric. Eventually, they all left. I really hate to think of what could have happened had I stepped out and investigated further and not realised till it was too late. Two years ago, we were camping at a place called Lake Glubwan in Australia. Now to set the scene, 2 mates were sitting around a fire. One was getting something from his car. I was passed out in my tent, and another mate was down at a tap rinsing his plate about 50 meters from the fire. He got smashed in the head with a beer bottle. At first, they thought it was me, thinking I'd drunkenly stumbled out of my tent and thrown the bottle. They went and checked I was out cold. There was nobody else in the camping area. Hadn't seen a single person since we had got there. What really freaked us out was not only that there was something paranormal, but it had enough force and aggression to be able to throw a bottle at him. This happened to me when I was little. I went camping with my older brother and mum. I was about 8, and I went to bed at around 10 in a sleeping bag inside my tent with both my mum and brother. Sometime during the night, I don't know when, I woke up, somewhere in the middle of the woods, still in my sleeping bag. I had no idea where I was, or where my tent was. I screamed. I heard my mum calling back for me in a panic. She was easily 200 yards away. To this day, I have no idea how I ended up in the middle of the woods, still inside my sleeping bag, asleep. It still gives me chills to this day. Imagine a 1984 to 1985 time frame. It was a break from college, and a group of us decided to go on a week-long raft trip. The river went through a Native American reservation. The nights were clear and beautiful. The river was slow and manageable. Everything was going pretty well, up until the next to last night. We finished our dinner, put everything away. My travel mates had snuggled into the tents. I stayed out to stargaze for a while, trying to identify different constellations because we had no moon. We were miles away from the nearest light pollution. The night sky was gorgeous. That's when I saw it. At the edge of one horizon, a huge, bigger than the moon, huge white light. It shot across the sky, faster than a plane, and disappeared below the far horizon. It took maybe a minute to transverse my entire sky view. I yelled for my friends to come and look, but by that time it was long gone. To this day I have no idea what I actually saw. A few years ago, I was camping in the Everglades in Florida with a few friends. We all had gone into our separate tents and were starting to fall asleep. The area was pretty noisy with bugs, crickets, birds, etc. I heard this low vibration, sounding almost like a roar. It was powerful enough to vibrate my chest. Suddenly, everything in the forest goes quiet. No birds, no bugs, nothing. About 30 seconds later, my phone vibrates. It's my friend in the other tent texting me, asking me if I heard the same thing. The four of us kept on texting each other, wondering what it was. About 10 minutes later, all the animals slowly started making noises again. I slept that night with my machete under my arm. I was in a cabin with 4 other people. I woke up at about 5 AM. They're all sleep talking at each other, like straight up arguing, grunting, mumbling, shaking, and everything else a person mid-sleep would do. Only 4 of them were actively engaging in some kinds of primitive sleep talk at once and towards each other. It scared the hell out of me. I didn't know if they're messing around, and I've never seen anything like it before. In the morning, I told them about what happened, and they didn't remember a thing. I really don't have any explanation for this, and it really terrifies me. This wasn't exactly camping, but I managed a resort in the Andirak for several years. The place is old and rustic. It's miles from civilization and very peaceful. It was built in the 20s and had somewhat of a sordid past. It was built for a Canadian senator who would run rum down from Canada during the Prohibition. We still had the underground lock safe from where he would store the booze, as well as hidden booze hiding areas underneath some of the cabins. Calvin Coolidge stayed at a camp across the pond during his residency, and would visit my camp, for spirits I'm sure. Anyway, I met a girl and decided to sleep out under the stars. It began raining, so I suggested we slept on the screen porch in the boathouse, which I thought was a pretty good compromise. So after we're all set up, it's getting pretty late. It's about 1:30 AM or so. We're laying there. I tossed and turned because I couldn't sleep. I have a hard time falling asleep while outside. We laid there for about half an hour or so when I heard the bathroom door open in the boathouse. It could have been anything else but that door. Now my first thought was that it was my boss, the owner of the camp. She is notoriously nosy and has been known to spy on the staff at their quarters. So I thought it was probably her who made the noises. But then again, why would she have been hiding out in the men's bathroom in the boathouse for over an hour? That would be far beyond my comprehension. I proceeded to hear footsteps walking across the boathouse, down 3 stairs on the dance floor, and stopping right in front of the door to the screen porch. I lay there just waiting for the door to open. I called my boss's name, and as the minute stretched out, I started praying that she would open the door, walk away, sneeze, or anything. Nothing. The rest of the night I stayed up, stiff and straight as a poker in my sleeping bag. No receding footsteps, no door noises, nothing. Now the next morning, my girlfriend, she wasn't at the time, but she was 4 years that followed, rolled over to me and immediately said to me about the footsteps from the night before. She had also stayed up all night waiting for some other unexplained sound to follow the footsteps. She heard nothing. She was terrified. Never went into the boathouse again. I unfortunately had to go to the boathouse on a daily basis. Everything was cool during the day. At night, I had to turn off all the lights in the camp. This is something I've done every day for the last 3 years. However, every time I get a sense of dread going there, being alone in that dark boathouse. The worst part is the enormous hanging bed in there in front of the fireplace. It was put there for the previous camp owners to take naps out in the day, hang out on the chains, so that bed can be lifted out of the way for entering guests in the evening. Every single night, the bed was swinging, the 200-pound bed, swinging on its chains in the dark in the boathouse. Never during the day. Up until my last day at the camp, if I went in at night, the bed would be swinging. Some buddies and I went camping by the lake one night. At about 1:30 AM, we heard some rustling in the bushes and just figured it was a rabbit or something. We went over to check it out. Found nothing. At about 1:35 AM, a huge pickup truck that was lifted and blaring out loud music drove by, really, really slowly, shining a huge police-grade spotlight on my friends and I. The truck burned out and kept driving. So my best friends and I decided to drive up the road and see if we could spot anything unusual about the truck. We get to the main road, and there was probably 7 or 8 cop cars, lights flashing, and 2 or 3 ambulances. We stop and turn around. I swear it looked like something out of a horror film. A cop peeks on my window with his flashlight out of nowhere. He says, "What are we doing?" We told him we're camping and told him about the truck. He says, "Well, you boys might not want to camp here. We had a homicide and haven't located the suspect." My friend says, "Should we be worried?" And the cop says, "Well, I'm not scared, but there's 20 officers here and we all have guns." I said, "Yes, sir," and tore off back down to the campsite. My best friend called the rest of our buddies and told them to pack up the gear and not to ask any questions, and that we had to go out. We literally threw 2 fully pitched tents in the back of our trucks and got the hell out of there. The cops located the killer about 30 minutes later, at our own campsite. I went camping with some friends in a relatively remote location. We all went to sleep at around 11 PM. Woke up the next morning and all the trees behind our tents, around 100 feet away, were torn down. We checked the weather later and a freak tornado was reported to have popped up overnight. We just got lucky it bounced when it did, otherwise it would have killed us. My wife, dog, and myself were on the second day of an 80-kilometer hike in northern Ontario, the Kilnary Province Park. Set up camp on a point 750 meters into a lake. One way onto the point and one way off the point. We started hearing wolves about 9 PM. We went to bed by 10 and the howls were getting closer and closer. One howled from right behind us on the trail. I got out of the tent and started making noises in an attempt to scare them off. Usually this works for bears. I've encountered a few of them. I didn't see anything there and didn't hear anything after. I was glad. I went back to bed and laid down, trying to act confident as to not upset my wife. Then we both heard something outside of the tent. My dog was crazy quiet, yet shaken. I opened the tent to find a wolf staring at me about 20 meters away. He come about 5 closer. I grabbed my bear spray and took aim. I didn't use it, but I started to scream at the wolf and took a few fake charges at it. Again, usually this works when faced with a black bear if you have no escape. The wolf didn't care though. It kind of hung out for a few seconds, then kind of casually walked into the tree line, just far enough that I didn't see it anymore. I built a fire between the tent and the bush, sat up all night, kept my headlamp on all night. I then had to listen to 5 or 6 more howl to each other every 20 minutes. They were very close. I would estimate that they're within 50 yards away. I was sure they were going to come and grab my dog. At about 6 AM, a bunch of them started howling, altogether way more than during the night. It now sounded like 10 or 12 of them. We waited until about 8 AM, packed up, and got the hell out of there. We were 36 kilometers in. It took us 2 days to hike in. We hiked out in 7 hours. About an hour and a half into our hike, the wolves started howling behind us again. They were following us out. On the hike we even saw a bear and 2 cubs. The hike back was so frantic that my wife actually lost all of her toenails from it. We were very lucky to escape with our lives that day. I'm a CNA. This story takes place at work. Yesterday, I was pulled to the dementia unit. Getting pulled means they had a call off, so they take a CNA from a well-staffed floor and move them to fill the vacancy elsewhere. I rarely get pulled to the dementia unit, so I'm not super familiar with those patients. In order to get from my normal floor down to the dementia floor, I have to go through a back stairwell that requires an access code. I always take the stairs rather than the elevator, but I only ever feel uncomfortable in this one particular stairwell. It gives me creepy vibes, and I rush down the stairs as fast as I can. Again, I never get that feeling in any other stairwell. So I get down to the dementia floor and I'm about to go about my day, doing normal stuff. I'm assigned to the back section of one of the halls, and the last room in that section also gives me creepy vibes. No idea why, I just get a weird feeling whenever I'm there. I'm in the room providing care to the patient that's in there, and she goes, "He's here today. He's mad. You're in his space." Mind you, this patient has dementia. They say all kinds of odd things, so I just brushed it off and went about my business. Fast forward to the end of shift. I've given report to the oncoming CNA. Now, I'm just chatting with her until I can look back. She says if anyone got really agitated or if we had any issues on the shift that we should be aware of. I told her that everybody was pretty chill, except for that one woman in the back room. I told the CNA what she said about him being angry or whatever. The CNA looks puzzled and then says, "Did you take the elevator to get here, or did you take the stairs?" "The stairs," I replied. "Do you know why that stairwell has a keypad on it?" She says, "Nah, no idea. I always assumed it was just to keep visitors from wandering around and getting lost." Here's the story CNA told me about the back room and the stairwell. There was a patient who was in that back room. He was bitter and an angry old man. He was known to kick and bite many nurses and CNAs. However, he apparently had no chair or bed alarms. Alarms we attach to patients to alert us if they're trying to get up and move around without us knowing. So one day, when things were busy, somehow he snuck off the unit and hung himself in that stairwell. That's why we now have a code on the stairwell, so that a patient can never access this again. Apparently, it's an unwritten rule that you do not use his stairwell or he gets angry. According to the CNA, any patient that gets put in his room ends up seeing his ghost. Weird things happen in the room. TVs don't work, lights go on and off. The vitals machines will actually stop working, being very dangerous. So somehow that patient knew I had taken the bad stairs, and he was angry about it. It totally creeped me out, and I never used them stairs again because of it. I was too scared to. This happened about 8 or so years ago, around Thanksgiving in my grandma's house. Everyone was asleep except for me. The only people in the home were my grandparents, my mum, brother and I. No one else. This is key. I was on the computer because I couldn't sleep. I turned on a small TV to watch Adult Swim while I browsed the internet. Around 4:30, I get a chill up my spine. I suddenly heard some children laugh. Distinctly, the voices of a little girl and boy. I know I'm in all by myself, as far as being awake, so I turn to look at the TV. It's in the middle of something, so there's no laughter coming from it. I look at my computer. The sound settings are muted. It wasn't that. I sat there confused for a few minutes, while the giggles of the children continued. I thought maybe the kitchen radio was on. It was digital, so maybe it had just come on for some reason, like it had a timer. I got up, and I kid you not, as I walked to the door, with each step, the laughter grew louder, from giggling to hard laughter. I then started to hear crying as well. What was going through my mind is, what the hell kind of radio show is this? And I took more steps, nowhere near the door though. I took a few more steps, and the laughter turned hysterical, if not maniacal. The cries turned to screams, as if somebody's in excruciating pain. I was trembling with each step I took to the doorway, but my mind was on autopilot. I needed to get out of there and across the hall to my mum, who surely would help me notice the weird sounds too. The last couple of steps increased the laughter and crying to an almost deafening decibel. It was like I was at a concert, and the speakers were directly on my ears, blasting noise. It was painful and scared the hell out of me. It took all the courage I had, and as soon as I reached the doorway, I was sprinting. I started to run, but then something shoved me. I felt these hands at my chest pull me back into the room with enough force to throw me off balance. The crying and laughter stopped as soon as I was back in the room. This all happened within 20 or 30 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. I was so scared that I cried and slept in my tiny armchair before my grandma came in the room and made me sleep in her bed downstairs. I've never been able to explain it since this day. There is a place called Meadowbrook Manor in Rochester Hills, Michigan, my hometown. It's on the campus of Oakland University. It was owned by the Dodge family, and quite a few people have died there, including the young. My buddy worked there for years, and my wife hosts events there. I even proposed to her on the property. The house is beautiful, with stuff like secret staircases through bookshelves and other stuff, but this makes it really creepy. There's a few known ghosts there, including the Caramel Apple Girl. The story is she's a young, quiet ghost that lives in the home and holds a caramel apple with peanuts. Numerous people have claimed to see her, including my best friend who's a no-crap guy who would never tell anyone. He was clearing up at the end of an event, and there he saw a girl on the staircase eating a caramel apple. He said to her, "Are you okay?" She said she was lost. My buddy said, "Hold on, we'll find your parents to come down." He turned to grab a phone for a moment. When he turned around, she was gone. He checked the stairs, and the peanuts were there. He and a few others roamed the house looking for her. He called me, and I drove over because I thought it was awesome. After 30 minutes of searching, we called the police, and the employees locked up the place. When we were on the side of the house chatting with the university's police officers, a light turned on in one of the bedrooms, and we immediately freaked out because nobody's been in there for hours now. My buddy looks over to the cops. They look back at us trying to figure out what's going on. The cop starts walking over, stops, stares at us and says, "Screw that," because he heard the stories. He called back up, and before searching, apparently there were no peanuts on the stairs when they went in. I've never seen the ghost since, and nor has my buddy. As a kid, I grew up in a wildlife refuge in Long Island, Witheram. Way back around the Revolution, the Hawkins family had established the area, the town of Brookhaven, and owned a ton of property. The Bartow family was also a major landowner at the time. Between the two, they own most of the country. There's a Bartow family graveyard across the street to the north of the preserve, and a Hawkins family grave a few miles further north. While exploring the preserve, we found an additional Bartow grave. Most recent stone was from the mid-1800s. It looked as if no one had been there for decades. The fence was knocked down, trees were down all over the place. No path, no markings, nothing. While looking around and reading the stones, we noticed something strange. It was silent. This is a wildlife refuge. Animals are literally everywhere. There's birds, deers, squirrels, everything. Not here. No wind, no traffic, no birds, no animals, not even a mosquito. You can actually hear the blood pumping in your ears. I've never experienced anything like it. It's also clear. There's no trees inside the fence, no plants. It's covered in leaves. It's clearly untouched, but there's nothing growing. Everything around it looks like it's dying. I really have never seen anything like this before. Suddenly, a loud crack, an earth-shaking thump as a tree fell on the outskirts within a few feet of us. That put the creepy level over the top. We ran for it. Between the library, 2 records, refuge records, we couldn't find any information on this graveyard anywhere. All the others are photographed with logs everywhere, but this one, there's not even a footnote. So I grew up in Northern Virginia. We had plenty of battlefields and such to visit for school trips. In 5th grade, my class went to Belle Grove Plantation, which was at Cedar Creek Battlefield. Cool house. Still has damage to her columns from the gunfire that took place from the battle. Anyhow, my class was in the kitchen of the plantation, listening to our tour lady talk about whatever it is you tell a bunch of 10-year-olds about plantation life. There are these big double doors on each side of the room, and they're open. We hear humming coming from outside. The teacher's aide told us to knock off whoever was humming, but that's the thing. It wasn't any of us. It was coming from outside. They go to one side of the kitchen, come back in and go out to the side that leads to the garden. She comes back in, says to our tour lady, no one at all is out there, but you could still hear the humming right in the garden. Doesn't sound like much, right? Well, fast forward a few years, I'm reading a Ghost of Virginia book. There's a story about Bella Grove in it. Apparently, the lady of the home which was found in the smokehouse one day, badly beaten and half upon the embers, was actually found with fist marks on her face. She died just a few days later. A girl was then hung for it and accused of the murder. and the lady of the house liked to walk in the garden, always humming, and various people over the years were witnesses to that. It's not the humming itself which scares me, it's the fact that it's a preface to something terrible that was about to take place, and it's burned into history forever through the spirit. I was visiting a friend of mine who lives in Virginia. He has a nice little cabin in the mountains that hold a mere 4 people max. The highlight of his little home is his massive basement. This thing has to be 4 times the size of the home itself. He turned it into the ultimate man cave, complete with beer cooler, multiple TVs, couches, beanbags and pinball machine, pool table, you name it, it's there. The perks of being a bachelor knows no bounds. He and I were having a few drinks with some of his friends and playing video games one night when we all fell asleep in our respective seats. I woke up at 4 AM with an insane urge to pee due to drinking earlier. I went to the bathroom. It's locked. I could hear running water, so figured one of my friends was using the bathroom. I walked up the stairs to use the upstairs one. I turned the handle and the knob fell off. Well, crap, I thought to myself, I'll just have to wait. I turned to walk back down the stairs when one of the steps below collapsed. I fell through the step and caught onto the low board adjacent to the one that fell. The staircase is pretty high up, so I was kind of dangling there in some daze. My friend and buddies all wake up and ask what I'm doing. I tell them the board broke underneath my feet as I was trying to lower myself down to the ground. Then suddenly, the bathroom door flings open and slams into the wall. We all look to the door. No one's inside. The lights turn off. The sink stops running, then the door slowly starts closing again. I let go of the step in fear and crash to the floor. All of the others in the room stand up and cautiously start backing up to the stairs. We hear the toilet flush from behind the door and all screaming. They all book it up the stairs. I scrambled to get out from underneath the stairs. I had ripped the doorknob off so we couldn't open the door. The basement had just everything you could want, but it was lacking any kind of exit, besides from the door that I broke. My buddy was jiggling the doorknob and slamming his shoulder, but it wouldn't move. Then out of nowhere, the door bursts open, and a pile of scared men fall into the living room. We all rushed into the living room, closed the basement door, and slept on the couches. No one could explain what happened that day. I haven't been back to his cabin since. I hope that the spirits don't follow me. There's a bridge near where I grew up in Tennessee that is notorious for screaming at people at night. The screams aren't audible to the houses nearby, and supposedly, you have to sit on the actual bridge to hear it at all. Though I personally haven't tested it or anything. The common explanation is that it's a bobcat that lives under the bridge, but people have checked with dogs and such and never found any signs. Well, some friends and myself heard the story years ago, but never tested it. So one night, after a few beers, we get up the notion we're going to do a test. So 5 drunk guys pile into a beat up car and we drive down the park near the bridge. This is 1:30 AM or so and it's dead silent. We sat there for a good 45 minutes and nothing happened. We had the windows down and started debating whether or not this is real or not. That's when the scream happened. We had the lights off, and there was a moon, so you could see pretty far and well. There wasn't anything outside the car, but it was loud, and it sounded just like a woman with a particularly powerful lungs having her skin ripped off her right outside the window on the rear passenger side that faced off the bridge. Now, I've actually heard bobcats in heat while hunting, and they do scream, but nothing like this. It's hard to describe. They do it in little bursts. This was a good 3 or 4 seconds extended scream at incredible volume. Now, of course, we tore out of there like a demon was chasing us. A couple of miles down the road, we finally stopped and actually processed what had happened. My adrenaline was going so badly, and I was so scared, I was just shaking uncontrollably. One of my friends had actually peed himself because he was so scared. One friend left and vomited. It was insane. To this day, I have no explanation for it. When I was a senior in high school, my mum and I went to a psychiatric museum in Missouri. I knew nothing about it, except that my auntie wrote a paper on it for her psychology class, and it was supposedly very interesting. The museum itself is a separate, newer building, with the actual old hospital next door. The exhibit has a bunch of equipment and patients' belongings from when the psychiatric hospital was running in the early 1900s. So there's lots of creepy relics from the golden days of messed up therapy methods and procedures. None of this really bothered me though. As a side note, the museum also has separate exhibits about Native American tribes local to the area and the Pony Express. We entered the main floor. Nothing too interesting, just a gift shop and little displays. I felt fine there until we reached the second floor where the psychiatric exhibit began. As soon as the doors open, there's a figure. In my mind, I didn't want to believe it was real. It looked like a Death Eater from Harry Potter, only not as big and without a head. It followed us around the floor, through the psychiatric exhibit, eventually stopping. I told my mum to keep her feelings to herself, so I wouldn't have a biased experience. I looked at some of the items left behind by former patients. I felt a presence telling me not to touch any of them, or something bad would happen. Finally, we made it to the Native American exhibit, and the figure was there again. It followed us, but stayed about 20 feet behind, stopping when we stopped. We took the elevator to the morgue area in the basement. You'd think I'd feel something. No, I didn't feel anything. We then went to the main floor and left. When we got home, I mentioned it to my mum and said that I felt like something was following us. She agreed and said she saw the same thing I did. I decided to do a test. I had us face away from each other and draw what we thought it looked like. Turns out, we saw the exact same thing. After this, I emailed the museum and told them about what had happened. I didn't think they'd write back, but they did. They told me the experience is actually something that happens to their guests and staff, and that they've allowed investigators there, and they aren't really sure what the spirit is. All I know is that the figure I saw, that's the stuff of nightmares, and one that I hope to never see again. This happened about 3 years ago, but I stumbled across this sub and thought you guys might appreciate the story. I worked as a correctional officer for 5 years in an old county jail. One night, while I was doing my rounds, I entered our high security unit. This unit was mostly for unruly or dangerous inmates who often liked to fight others or had high notoriety cases like murder. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and the lights were about to go off for the night. In this particular unit, a lot of the cell inmates would like to stand at their doors and watch the dayroom TV from their cells since it was a solitary housing unit. I finished my rounds downstairs and I began climbing to the top tier. I glanced up at the near cell and saw an inmate watching TV from his door. I looked away for a moment and looked back and he was gone. I walked up to the cell and looked in. The cell was completely vacant. My stomach dropped. I had heard from my inmates and other co-workers that the jail was definitely haunted, but this was my first ever personal paranormal experience of this nature. I finished up my rounds and returned to my sergeant's office where I told him about what I'd experienced. Very calmly, he asked me which cell it is. I told him number 7. He told me that about 15 years prior, an inmate had killed themselves in that cell after he was charged with murder. My sergeant was a young officer at the time and first on the scene. He told me that he truly believed that the inmate was framed for murder and that the mother was truly the guilty one. Finding this out sent chills up my spine. When I was a toddler, I woke up one night and wanted to sleep with my parents because I was just getting used to sleeping in a regular bed instead of a crib. This wasn't the first time this happened, so they had one of those plastic safety doorknob covers in my room. This time, they must have taken it off when I got out of bed and opened the door. Now about 5 feet away from me in the hallway, there was a tall black slender figure, all black with no facial features, a circled head, arms and legs that are really thin, and fingers that were sharp. It made no sound and was gliding as it walked. The way that it moved was the most scary part for me. I only saw it for about 2 seconds, then slammed the door and started crying. Minutes passed until my mum shows up at my door and calms me down. I don't remember mentioning it to her, so she thought I had a bad dream. So then, got a roll of blankets and put them on the hallway floor for us to sleep together. Now my feet ended up being scratched really badly. It couldn't have been my mum because her nails weren't long enough. It really felt like a burning sensation. My mum couldn't explain it either at the time. I'm 18 now, and it's one of the earliest memories that I have, and the most terrifying. I'm glad that I haven't seen the figure since. Early last summer, my roommate, who is also my best friend, and I moved into our first off-campus house in our fairly large college town. The house was perfect for us, and we're really excited. It was in a somewhat low-income area, but for the most part, it was a very nice area and very quiet. When we moved in, the home on one side of ours was unoccupied, pending sale, and the duplex across the street was being renovated. So we were mostly isolated on our end of the block, with very few immediate neighbours. Most days during the week, there was a middle-aged man who was working on the duplex across the street. I never interacted with him, but I assumed he might have been the owner of the duplex because he was always working there, always by himself, and he didn't seem to be affiliated with a company or anything. All of that is just to say that I got used to seeing him around and thought of him as my neighbour. One day, about a month after moving in, I was at home alone. My roommate was at work when somebody knocked on the front door. Normally, I'm very cautious with strangers, but this time, I was not. I peered through the peephole and saw a man who just looked like the guy who's always working across the street. Thinking he may have been coming over to introduce himself or to ask for something, I opened the door with a friendly expression. The man was holding a phone and looked very flustered. "Hey man, is your roommate in here?" "Oh, he's not. Alright. I live down the street. I wanted to see if you guys needed anything done with your lawn or anything." I was a little confused, but I greeted him with a smile and politely turned him down. He continued the small talk. "I see your license plate's from New York. You from there? I used to live there too." Again, I politely engage in small talk, but I'm confused as to why he's there. What he said next should have been a major red flag, but I was still under the assumption that he was just my neighbour trying to be friendly. He continued with, "I stopped by the other evening. No one's there. You guys work nights?" My hours varied, as did my roommates, but I wasn't going into the details of our schedules to some random guy. Even if it was our neighbour, I just said, "Well, sometimes." Next, he cut the chase of what he wanted. "Listen man, my wife works at the hospital. She locked her car keys in her car. I just got off the phone with the locksmith. He needs upfront pay to unlock the car. I don't have cash. My wife's purse is in the car. Can you help me out with $17? As soon as we get it unlocked, I'll pay you back." Now even though I'm in a friendly mood, my no crap senses go off automatically to a stranger asking for money. There's a lot of people in that town who ask for money on the street, so I'm accustomed to hearing all types of wild stories to try and get money. But because I think it's the same guy from across the street, I don't immediately say no. He seems much more mentally with it compared to the beggars. He also seems to have put together good clothes and has good hygiene. Plus, it's my neighbour. Right. I give him the benefit of the doubt and agree to lend him whatever cash I have, which at the time is only $4. I said sorry, I haven't got any more. Suddenly, his demeanour goes from very friendly to kind of cold. He says, "Do I have more?" I say no. He walks off angrily without saying thank you. That seemed very odd to me considering how nice and talkative he was in the beginning. At that point, I felt like I'd gotten tricked. Why would my neighbour try and scam me like that? Of course, he'd never come back with the money anyway. That evening, my roommate came home from work and I tell him the story. I was laughing at myself for having been tricked, but my roommate's face goes white and he does not laugh. "Dude, the same thing happened to me the other night while you weren't there. Same guy, same story." When my roommate spoke to him, it was at night, and the man was wearing a hat, so my roommate couldn't get a good view of him like I did. It was the same guy though. I got a little freaked out. We quickly realised it's definitely not our neighbour from across the street. It's just a coincidence they're of similar age and build. I think back to our conversation from earlier in the day. The first question he said was whether my roommate was home. He said if we worked nights and was examining my car. We decided to call the police. The officer we spoke to was pretty blunt and told us that this person may be scooping out our home to break in. He told me that I should make sure to lock everything and that I should buy a sign that says beware of dogs. He told me to call 911 if the guy ever comes back, but ultimately, they really couldn't do anything at that moment. For the next couple of days, both my roommate and I felt pretty paranoid and creeped out. We closed all the blinds at night because we felt like he was watching us. He mentioned he'd stopped by when no one was home alone, and he had stopped by when just my roommate was home. So clearly, he'd been stalking us or our home to some degree. We decided to buy a beware of dogs sign and put it right in front of our door. Of course, we didn't have a dog. After a week or so with no incidents, we thought that maybe he was just some guy looking to make some quick money off of some dumb college kids in the neighbourhood. That night, I decided to stay at my girlfriend's place. My roommate said that he'd be fine staying at home alone, and that I would just text him if he needed anything. The next morning, I woke up and looked at my phone. At 2 AM, my roommate said to me, "Dude, there's something happened tonight. It's fine now, but wake me up as soon as you get home so I can let you know." I jumped out of bed and raced home to wake him up. Here's what happened. At 1 AM, my roommate was asleep in his room when he woke up to somebody screaming outside. At first, he could not make out words, but it sounded like it was getting closer. My roommate's bedroom is right next to the front door, and soon enough, it sounded like the person was at our front door. At that proximity, my roommate could make out a few words. "I don't care about your frickin' dog." The person was pacing back and forth on the stoop, furious. My roommate then heard him walking around the perimeter of the home. Without hesitating, my roommate called 911, but the man was gone by the time the cops got there. A few blocks over, the cops found the guy in the parking lot. They bring my roommate there to see if it's the same guy, but since I was the only one who saw him in daylight, he wasn't exactly sure. This man was similar age and build, so he was pretty sure it is the same guy. The cops tell the man that he's going to be arrested if he comes onto the property again. Unfortunately, we still had a couple more incidents with the guy, but thankfully, he never came back in the middle of the night and tried to break in again. He knocked on our door 2 more times, but both times, we saw him through the peephole and did not answer. Both times, he walked off before the cops could come. We also walked by one time when my girlfriend and I were carrying groceries to the home and he started heading towards us smiling. He said very creepily, "You want a drink?" I said no and he backed off, slowly, still smiling. Nothing's happened since writing this, but to be honest, I'm sure that something is. About a week ago, I was home alone throughout the night. My boyfriend went to work and I just could not sleep. I was up until about 3 AM, which isn't unusual for me. I was sitting in my bedroom, My dog's downstairs in her crate to stop her from terrorizing my cat, who was asleep in the spare room. Anyway, I was sitting there watching YouTube and TV and writing on a novel and kept hearing things go bump in the night. A chain rattle, which I thought was weird, but figured it was my neighbour's fence. Things moved in the backyard. Maybe it's a raccoon, I thought to myself. Anyway, despite me explaining things away in my head, I still got up with my pistol on my hip and looked out of the windows and didn't see anything of concern. I had just went through the home and checked all the angles again and sat back down trying to calm my nerves. Then, my not normally vocal dog started barking and growling. That's when I started thinking that there really is somebody in my yard. See, the thing is, her pen is facing a bay window which leads into the backyard. They would have to be standing on something for her to see them, vice versa. Somebody had to be peering through my window. I was shaken, tired, absolutely terrified, but I went downstairs to let my 95-pound pup into the yard, me in tow with my pistol. I still was thinking that there was no way somebody's in my yard, thinking that I overreacted. I let my pup out the door, and she instantly was crouching. Hair on the back of my neck was now standing up, and a low growl crept out as she walked around the side of the home towards the window. I've never seen her like this before, and told her to go pee, and immediately called her back into the home when she was done. The next morning, I wake up. My boyfriend's home and I start babbling about how I thought somebody was in the yard there. Just talking about it made me nervous. He thought I was overreacting. He basically dismissed it as a raccoon or possum. I began thinking that sleep deprivation was probably the cause. We took our pup into the yard to play like normal then. We're running around the yard and goofing off. My boyfriend's standing near the home smoking a cigarette and pacing around and goes over to the window. I'm kind of watching him now, and he tells me to come over where he is. My heart sank and he says, "Yeah, I believe you." He pointed to the window, and right on the windowsill, on the outside, there's distinct swipe marks where somebody's balanced themselves through a rip in the curtain on our living room. Now, I'm still not sure why they didn't actually break in. I think it is probably because I had my dog with me. I'm very lucky that I did, because if not, I hate to think of what would have happened with them knowing I was home alone. I'm still very scared that they're gonna return, but hopefully, now they know that I've got a dog, they're gonna stay well away.
Let me start off by saying that before this occurrence, I was in disbelief that things like this actually existed. I went with my friend to a psychic one day, and she asked if I had anything weird going on in my house. I was surprised that she asked that, because weird things have been happening ever since I moved from the north to the south. To explain, things have been moving around, such as things flying off counters, walls, and even the television and lights would turn on and off by themselves. The logical person I am tried to reason with myself, and tried to convince myself that there was a logical way that these sorts of things happened. She informed me that I had a young man following me. She said that he was angry and was trying to communicate with me, and tried to get my attention because he was convinced I could see him, which I most certainly could not. Of course this freaked me out to no end. She also mentioned that this man loved me and described him as an attractive man, probably in his late 20s with blonde hair, tall, thin, and with a strong jawline and face. This will be more important later in my story. What she tried to do was communicate with him and tell him to move on and to leave me alone. I honestly didn't even know if this was true or not, but went along with it anyway, because who wants a ghost following them for eternity? Well, I went home a little uncomfortable, but tried to shake it off. That was working until I got into my bathroom, and I kid you not, I felt someone scratching my arm hard, and I looked down to see scratches being formed, and they were very deep. In that moment I was terrified, but of course tried to act unfazed. Well, everything was still going on, but for a long time I just simply ignored it, and it seemed to lessen up. However, I got into a serious relationship a while ago, and things started getting worse. I felt constant anger in my house, which was worse in my bedroom to be honest. The presence was so strong that it seemed like I could sense exactly where the ghost was. Well, scarier things were to come. To explain things that were going on now, it feels like something is shaking me awake whenever I fall asleep. I can hear breathing when I'm laying down next to my head. I wake up with bites on my leg, scratches and sometimes bruises. But the scariest thing to happen happened last night. My boyfriend astral projects, which I didn't even know was a thing until last night, and he said that in the corner of my bedroom, this man was eyeing me down while I slept next to my boyfriend. My boyfriend tried speaking with him, and even when they were speaking, he wouldn't lift his gaze from me. The man said that he finally found me. He loved me first, was convinced I could see him. My boyfriend tried to reason with this ghost, and the ghost got furious and tried to come at my boyfriend, which is when he woke up. My boyfriend told me all this when I woke up that morning. The strange thing is that he gave me more details than the psychic, and I was stunned, because I'd been having dreams of the man that had fit the exact description for as long as I could remember. The really strange thing is that these dreams felt like memories, and that man and I looked in love. Things always get worse when my boyfriend is around. Another thing that the ghost said was that he was protecting me, and that I had a lot of evil in my life, and he shielded me from it, which I believe strangely is true, because I did have both abusive boyfriends and an abusive father. I think I really angered him yesterday though, because when my boyfriend left, things were really uneasy around my house, so I stayed up because I was too scared to sleep. With that said, I lay down on my couch. I started to feel something grazing its fingers along my leg, touching my feet and hair. I ignored it all, and I started being pinched, which I of course ignored as well. The scariest thing, however, was when I got up, I could literally barely breathe. This morning I woke up and my voice was nearly gone, if that says something at all. It's a holiday today, or else I'll be trying to talk to a priest or something. If you've gone through this long post, thank you. I just really need peace of mind right now.
I used to work at one of those 24-hour Walmart supercenters. I was right out of high school, a 19 years old female, and worked as a cashier there for 2 terrible years where I was subjected to all kinds of abuse from customers and co-workers alike. I mean, I would get screamed at. I even got slammed into a register face first. However, the time that sticks out in my head is the time that a customer was going to follow me home. I had just started my shift, and the second I got on the register, I had a line about 10 people long. For some reason, the Walmart I worked at never had enough registers open, so people got really mad and impatient by the time they got to me. I get right to work, keep a smile plastered to my face while making the minimal mandatory small talk I can. Most of the customers were polite, but not very interested in talking, so it's easy to fall into a bit of a cashier robot mode. So I get to this guy who had only 2 items, yogurt and band-aids. I ring it all up in record time and neatly bag it. But the customer doesn't seem to be paying any attention. He wouldn't look at me or answer my greeting. His eyes just stared right down at the conveyor belt. Maybe he zoned out. The conveyor belt didn't look too dirty. I hadn't had a chance to wash it yet, because the second I'd walked over to the register, people lined up. As a side note, always bag up your produce. Conveyor belts get really nasty. So I finish up, tell him his total, which was something like $4.36. He starts fishing in his pockets for exact change without looking up. Inwardly, I groaned but kept my customer service smile fixed into place. He is wearing one of those muddy brown denim jackets with lots of pockets. As he rifles through, I kept on catching whiffs of BO and cigarettes. His hands were pretty dirty, dried out from the cold weather. He dumps out an assortment of change onto the counter. Still not looking at me, I then begin to slowly count it up. Everything is uncomfortably quiet. I can feel the eyes of every customer in line onto me, all except for the guy who was then digging into his pants pockets. He was about 30 cents short. I let him know once I was sure he wasn't going to find any more coins. It was then that he looks at me, makes a scrunched up face. His eyes were very dark brown, almost black, and they pierced right into me accusingly, as though I was telling a lie or something. While he was watching, I counted everything again. It's 30 cents. Can't you just give me your employee discount? Nah, against the rules. I answered apologetically. Want to put something back? Now I wasn't about to get fired for giving someone my discount. He wasn't the first person to ask for it, but most people pretended they were joking. It was clear as day that he was not. Nah, I want 'em, he said, glaring at me. I was beginning to wish that he'd started staring at the conveyor belt again instead of at me. He was making me pretty uncomfortable. If I had 30 cents in my pockets, I would have paid it myself just to get him to go away. He reaches over the bag, but I turn the little bag casserole so that he can't. I know you get a discount, plug it in. He completely blows up at this point, but I just shake my head and look at the other customers, probably with a deer in headlights expression on my face. People are watching, but he does nothing. This is just something that's inconvenience in him, even though I'm pretty scared. I'd already started flashing my register lights so that the CSM would come on, but they were notorious for taking their sweet time. Look, I'll get a CSM, but it may take a few minutes. Now this is something that I've never offered, but the man just goes off and goes on about how it's not that much and why he needs it, and began swearing profusely. He leaves before the supervisor comes over, grabbing all of his change, shoving it into one pocket and storming off. Now, to be honest, I'm relieved that he's gone, and continued working in uneasy silence. Everything seems to go on as normal after that. My shift ends at midnight, and I manage to clock out on time for once. I didn't have a car, and would normally call my mum to pick me up, but she was out of town, and it was too late to call anyone else, so I decided to walk rather than waste money on a cab. I lived about 20 minutes away, and felt pretty safe walking because you didn't really tend to run into pedestrians at that hour. After a few minutes of walking, I noticed that a car was driving slowly behind me. The speed limit's 45 miles per hour. This car was probably going 10. I got a bad gut feeling. I walked a little faster while trying to rationalize it. It could have been someone who wanted to offer me a ride or get directions. But no, whoever it was stayed right behind me and did not try to pull up next to me, even though they're going real slow. After about 5 minutes of this, the car finally turns into one of the neighborhoods. I'm relieved, but it's short-lived. The driver parks his car on the curb and gets out of his car. He then comes jogging up next to me. I realize immediately that it was a yogurt/Band-Aid guy. He's wearing the exact same muddy brown jacket, staring at me with those dark eyes. I turn around and start jogging down the sidewalk, which is icy, and he then jogs up next to me. I can actually hear the change jingling in his pocket. He doesn't say anything at first, so I try to run faster without slipping. Had this guy been sitting there in the parking lot for hours waiting for me to get off work? Apparently so. I feel him staring at me and turn my head to look at him while running as fast as I can on the ice. "What colour's your underwear?" he said. The question disgusted me. My immediate reaction was, "Don't be a creep," and I punched him in the face. I hurt my hand, but he stops running for a second, bends down to touch his face. He then said okay, but I just kept on running. I'm too scared to look back. Now I'm really not sure if he kept on following me after that, but I didn't run straight home because I was scared of him figuring out where I lived. When I did make it home, probably an hour later, I went to my landlady's apartment first and told her what happened. I was really shaken up, and I told her that if she saw a suspicious guy around the building, call the police. My mum was out of town, and she didn't answer my calls, so I watched Disney movies until I was able to sleep. The next day, I told the manager at work. They didn't care. In hindsight, I should have probably called the police, but I was young and thought that if it's necessary, management would have to do it. I felt really angry that they didn't take me seriously or care that I was scared. I really just wanted to go home early because I was scared that he would show up again. But they told me no, go off to the registers. I quit shortly after because of this, and the stalking stopped, and I never saw him again.
I went to BCT in January 2017 in Fort Steele, Oklahoma. We had 50 people in our platoon, and each night about 10 of us had fire guard, 2 to a shift, where you're up for an hour and clean the living quarters. One person cleaned while the other person manned the desk by the entrance. The second week or so I was cleaning the latrine, restroom in army lingo, by myself while my partner was in the other room. I would always get these weird feelings as if someone was watching me. I was walking towards a little closet in the latrine that held the brooms and mops, and as I approached, the light in the closet turned on. It was activated by a switch, no motion sensor. It freaked me out, and I stood there for a second frozen, so I ran in there, put the mop away and ran out the latrine. The next few times I cleaned the latrine by myself, I still got strange feelings, but the task had to be done. Around week 4, where everyone starts to really know each other, and you know all the 50 people's names by heart, word got around that the other people experienced things too. One guy said while he was roaming around the halls at night, he saw a shadowy figure walk out the latrine and towards him, and then evaporated. Another person said he heard noises on the other side of the latrine whilst he was cleaning it. One guy said he heard voices. The worst story I heard was this guy named Hunt. He slept right next to the latrine door. He said he woke up to see a dark figure hovering above his bed, and he screamed like a girl. He said it happened a few times after that, and he was losing his mind. He once needed to use the latrine after hours, and was too afraid to go in and turn the lights on. The scariest moment was during the daytime, when me and my buddy were taking a latrine break. We both ran inside the latrine, and right as we flipped the light switch on, I saw a 6-foot-tall black figure standing there, and it evaporated as the light came on. He saw it too, and it was the scariest moment I've ever had. Around week 9 or 10, the final week, the drill sergeants begin to talk to you like normal human beings. We had a Q&A, and someone asked about the haunted living area. Our drill sergeant said something along the lines of, "You're not the first platoon to talk about this shit. I personally think there's a portal in here. People have killed themselves here for a long time, and I think they stick around. But fuck it, I'm not the one who lives here, so I don't mind." The last few nights sleeping there were tough. Some people might not believe my story, but I felt some would appreciate it.
We moved a lot when I was a kid, but through high school, I always used to take the same bus. It was about half a block away, where a quiet suburban street intersected with a slightly busier one. I was often alone, early in the morning. For the longest time, the most interesting thing that happened was a raven trying to drop stuff from a tree on me, or that a family of deer would follow me through the park, across the street from my home to the bus stop through the fog, and past me to walk in the forest reserve beyond the intersection. It was a quiet neighborhood. Only a handful of cars might pass while I waited for the bus. The deer stopped following me after the harassment began. That morning, a jeep suddenly hit the brakes and slowed down in front of me. The driver had ordered the windows down. Even though it was a chilly wet autumn morning, one of those days where the mist just clings to everything, and the clouds are so low in the sky that you feel like you're up with them. Because of the fog, they hadn't seen me until they're literally meters away, and their braking made a loud screeching sound. They stopped the car, and the driver just sat there, staring directly ahead. I couldn't make them out. They were wearing a light grey hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses. I didn't see anyone else in the car. After about 30 tense seconds, during which my bemusement gave way to concern that somebody was going to hit this guy, stopped in the road. He finally turned to me, yelled a racial slur, smiled, and took off. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was newish to the area. I'm not great with faces, and I figured it was one of the kids at high school trying to be edgy. Or maybe just an idiot. Either way, I didn't think about it at all until the next week, when it happened again. This time, he had guys with him, and the windows were tinted. I couldn't see him. He yelled a slur at me. I could hear their laughter as he driven off. This continued to happen, sometimes twice in a week, sometimes going months in between. They sounded young, so I continued to write it off as another weird local hazing ritual, but gradually it got under my skin. There were two things that bothered me. First, the slurs. They were ugly and hateful. They sounded very aggressive towards me, even though I felt they could tell I wasn't Mexican or Asian. Second, their license plate was obscured every single time. This is a very wealthy area I'm describing, and the local law enforcement wouldn't call out anyone who lived there on a violation. So I wasn't surprised that they got away with it, but it did give me pause. One morning, I was ready to yell back at them, but instead of yelling, they just swerved at my location on the sidewalk. I jumped out of the way and ran behind a fence, but the Jeep ended up whipping through where I'd been standing before and sped off, obviously hoping I was there again. At that speed, it would have done some serious damage if it hit me. I figured the kid had overshot and actually didn't want to hurt me. But some of the things that followed made me wonder. One morning, I come up to the bus stop. There was just blood all over where I usually stood. It was wet from the rain, turning dark in places. I knew what it was. It wasn't in huge amounts, but very off-putting. A few days later, there was a dead animal there, mangled and brutalized. It wasn't even a roadkill. I could not take my eyes off it, even after getting on the bus. It wasn't there when I returned in the afternoon. It wasn't an accident. I feel certain. It looked to me as though it had been put there on purpose, and it had been stabbed there repeatedly. An extreme overkill. It was placed in the exact spot where I would stay. Now, this really scared me. I started to see the Jeep outside of the morning bus stop, but the windows were never down now, and it always sped off when I looked at it. Now, this whole thing carried on for literally years. It was at least 4 years. One day in the summer, I was walking through my neighbourhood with a friend, and the Jeep come by at a very high speed. They threw something at me. Loads of stuff flew down my shirt and to my pants. All I could think to do is to turn to my friend James and say, "You saw that, right?" Because nobody else even witnessed the other events. My family members were very skeptical every time I mentioned it. I had to go home and change my clothes to take a shower. Now, whatever it was hit me at such a high speed that it went into my hair and literally everywhere. It was then that I started taking the situation more seriously. I had bruises for weeks. I started to catch a ride with my brother in the mornings, or wait behind a local NFL player's fence until I heard the bus come in. I didn't ever go outside until I had text confirmation that my ride was there. If I heard a car, I would run off to the bushes. They swerved at me a few more times. Then I never saw them again. Some other strange things happened, and I've had stalkers since, but I've never been able to connect the dots between these, nor figure out who the people in the Jeep were or where they lived. My parents have moved to a different part of the community now, but I'm still extremely jumpy and always terrified that I'm going to see that Jeep again.
To start off, I don't believe in the paranormal, despite a very large amount of stories I've heard, and this is my only first-hand experience. Enjoy. A bit of backstory first. I used to help out of a local air cadet squadron in the UK. I was an expert plastic model kit maker. This meant that I was quite good when I was a cadet there, and they were more than happy to let me stick around to keep making plastic model planes. We were busy making a model for a competition, and the deadline was very, very close. As always, we were months behind, so a small handful of cadets and myself would stay behind a few hours, and then would also do a Saturday of paint sniffing. I mean model making. This story takes place late on one of those Saturday sessions. The building is a military building, so it's locked at both an outside gate and the building itself. One extremely important feature is whenever you open any windows and doors, it creates a vacuum that shakes the shutters in the kitchen like hell. No one can get in or out the building without the shutters rattling and scaring the living daylights of anyone in the building. The actual story. All the cadets have gone home now, and I'm doing some final touches that end up being an extra hour and a half of painting. It's 11 at night, and it's been utterly silent. Suddenly, I hear forceful water pouring from upstairs. Crap. Just 2 weeks ago, a tap in the ladies' toilets exploded and flooded the top floor, and leaked downstairs. I thunder upstairs, shove the ladies' toilet door open, but no difference in sound. It was coming from the cleaning cupboard right next to the ladies' toilets. So I tried to open the door to the cupboard. It was locked. Aha, the key would be in the box in the office, so I tried the door. It was also locked. So I grabbed the building keys from my pocket, only 2 sets exist, unlocked the door, unlocked the key box, and unlocked the cleaning cupboard. Surely enough, the water sound got louder. In the cleaning cupboard is a low sink for filling up buckets, etc., and the tap is on a full blast. But it was going into a bucket that was sat in the sink at an angle. The bucket was only half full, and if it didn't get full, it would have started to spill over the edge and flooded the cleaning cupboard. So I turned the tap off, pour out the bucket, and put it nowhere near the sink. I quickly did a patrol around the building, throwing doors open jokingly shouting, "Got you!" Model making scalpel in hand, but nothing, no one. And then, quietly packed up, locked up, and noped out of there. The following Monday, I told everyone about the spooky happenings that happened that night, expecting them to just laugh and reassure me, but nope. A few stories about bike bell ringing, lights being turned on, motion sensors going off in rooms, despite no one ever hearing the characteristic sound of the kitchen shutter rattling when no one entered the building. So what could it have been? I was laughed at very loudly when I said to my paranormal believing friend, but the building was too new to be haunted, because I thought ghosts had to be old jail wardens in castles. Spooky.
I'm a 20-something-year-old female student at a pretty big university in the Midwest, and I work as a desk clerk at one of the student libraries. I basically check books and equipment in and out, give directions for the building and area, and help patrons with what they may need. I'm also a talkative and friendly person, and that makes me a good customer service person. One that is open to chat with people. I know all the regulars by name, and most of the people I see in the library are really great people. That's most. One night around 9 PM, another library employee, Mark, shows up to chat. He works in another department that has him walking around all the building. So he frequently passes my desk and says hi. I had a headache, so I wasn't really up for casual conversation. And knowing Mark pretty well, I told him that I wasn't feeling too well and was eager to get off work soon. He wishes me well and went off on his way. During this exchange, a patron had come up behind Mark to wait for my attention, which was normal considering I work from a front desk. As Mark leaves, the man steps up to take his place in front of my desk, and just stares at me for a second with an uneasy smile on his face. I'd seen him a few times mulling around the library in recent weeks. He usually just sat in the cafe area reading a local paper. He looked to be in about his mid-30s and wore pretty nice clothes, so I didn't think he was homeless or anything like that. He said he overheard that I wasn't feeling well and asks if I want him to grab me a drink from the vending machine down the hall, as the cafe closed at 8. I politely declined, obviously not wanting to take drinks from any kind of stranger. He seemed a little bit miffed, but I didn't mention it. He then said he overheard that I got off soon and wanted to walk to my car with me. Becoming wary and alert, I again declined. I began to consider my options for an escape. The desk is only staffed by one person at a time on weeknights, and considering it's a spring semester, there are just not a lot of people around the library. With no co-workers to cover the desk for me, I can't leave. My bosses work up on the second floor in the admin's offices, but I know my favourite supervisor isn't working today. This meant I couldn't get a supervisor down here without a legitimate reason. Even if I call upstairs, I can't very well explain the situation over the phone because it's literally right next to me. And this guy would have overheard everything. He knows what he would have done. Not really sure what to do next time. I turned around to hide the confusion and fear on my face. I stood and grabbed the disinfectant wipes and began wiping the counters, just to have another job to do, rather than sitting idly with this creep standing at my desk. I'd only been turned away from him for less than a minute when I heard keyboard clicks on my computer. I rolled around and see that my Facebook was open again. He must have done some keyboard command to switch tabs because my Facebook was open and logged in, but in a different tab when I left the computer. Now it's very obvious that this guy had my first and last name. At this point I'm scared, but honestly, in the moment I was just pissed off. I said to him what was he doing, as he turned the monitor at an angle so he could see the screen and began analysing my profile. Then he said, "Oh, so your name is... Nice to meet you." Obviously, I couldn't lie and say it's somebody else. I mean, my profile picture's there. This really got to me. I told him how rude it was and invasive it was. He responded by saying it's on a public computer, so it's public property. Yeah, right. Then he made a move towards me and leaned over the desk a bit, tried grabbing my arm. I was about to start getting heated when Mark come down the stairs saying that he'd heard me from the stairwell. I must have been talking pretty loud at this point. I was visibly angry, as Mark could see. As I explained that he'd been trying to buy me a drink and walk me to my car, and went as far as to basically steal my personal info. Now, he's also annoyed at this point. He stepped up to the guy's face and told him to forget my name and to go away. The creepy dude smiled and said, "I'm only trying to make friends," and walked away smiling. We told him that I'd be calling the building security if he comes to my desk again. He then swore at me, called me ugly, and stormed off. Mark asked if I was okay. I asked him to cover the desk for a few minutes when I went up to explain what happened to my boss. Since the incident, I haven't seen him again, but I got the feeling that I was being watched many times after this. I hope I don't see him again.
I have always known that there are people around us. People who's no longer here on all spectrums. I've dealt with bad places. I've had strange encounters. I was very intuitive as a child. But as it goes for most of us, it tends to fade with age. And at 23, I still read tarot to my friends and family. I wear my crystals for when I feel like it's needed. And I always try to be respectful. Just after New Year's, I started struggling with sleep paralysis, really bad. It's not totally new to me, but last time, a few years back, it was not nearly this bad. Now it's all full-on paralysis, dark beings around me, no control whatsoever. ugly creatures telling me awful things that sometimes would happen. These things would sit on my chest and scratch me up real bad. This lasting for what felt like forever. It started affecting my health, as I never slept, and when I did, this happened. And then, for no other reason than to have it in case I ever needed it, I got a Ouija board. The board itself is nothing special, from eBay, straight from a factory of some sort. The new smell very potent, but I was happy with it, as it was a just in case thing. I put it up on the shelf next to my desk, where I keep all my crystals, Wicca books, herb recipes, tarot cards and sage. Just the night after I got my board, a new paralysis started up. But this time something was different. There was something else, someone else, there with me, and all the bad things. She was to my left. I couldn't turn my head, so I couldn't see her. But I knew she was there, kneeling beside me. It's okay, Emily, you're sleeping. But you should probably wake up. They're not nice, honey. Go back. Go inside. Wake up. Breathe with your mouth. Wake up, Emily. She spoke slowly, as it was hard for her to get the words out. But at the same time, she was so full of, not power, but strength. The fact that she knew my name didn't even occur to me. Neither did who she was. All I did was focus on her words, and try to do what she told me. And then, after some time, I woke up. I was so relieved, I didn't even know what to think. I didn't even dare to hope that this could be a way out of the horrible cycle I was in, but it kept happening. The third night, she stroked my hair as well, telling me I was doing great. After that, I would feel her around, even when I was awake. Sometimes at night, I would hear a soft knock, twice, from nowhere in particular. I called out a small, "Hey," and then came another knock. I'm not really sure, but I think it's her way of saying she's here, and that it's safe to sleep. I started slowly to enjoy sleep again, and I knew that if her paralysis happened, that she would help me out. The paralysis will go from several times a night to maybe 2 to 3 times a week, then nothing for almost a month. She was still around though, knocking, just being around me. I never see her or hear her voice when awake, but I know her presence very well by now. Then, last week, after midnight, I was sitting here by my desk, suddenly feeling very, very uncomfortable with the thought of going to sleep, even as I was super tired. I guess I kind of spaced out, but suddenly I got this urge to take down the spirit board. I didn't use the palette, or whatever you call it in English, but I just knew where to look. It was super weird, but I grabbed a paper and pen and tried to write as my eyes darted over the board. Here's what I got. Heysafe, OK, OK, SAFENOWOKEM. Then my hand went from the paper to lie on the goodbye, and I had the warmest feeling inside. I was a little, I don't know. It was a weird night. I went to sleep with mixed feelings, and sure enough, I woke to paralysis. A heavy panic started to set in. I then heard her again, much stronger, her voice self-assured, young and full of life. "Okay, I have an idea. Don't be scared. Just listen to me now. 1, 2, 3. At the last word, she slammed her hands together, or I'm guessing she did. I still can't see her, but I woke up so fast. That's the last time I've had any paralysis or stressful sleep. It's only been about a week, but this is like a new life to me. I still don't know who she is, but I know she's my friend. Maybe I can help her someday. I know I'll try my best if she ever needs me. She still knocks to let me know she's here every now and then, and the other day, my Snapchat filter started finding a face next to mine when I use a dog filter, and it's been happening several times since then, no matter where I am, and always behind me on my right. I don't know how, but I know it's her.
So I went to a private Catholic school in Oklahoma. The school itself was built before the state was a state. It's over 100 years old, and it used to be a covenant. So this place is basically a textbook set up for haunted stories. So before I went there, I had heard stories of the school being haunted, mainly the 4th floor. They always had these legends about things that happened there. They always spoke about the pictures on the 4th floor and never being straight. And if you fixed it, they would mess up again. And if you took a ball up there, it would be pushed around. So my first day on part of the orientation was taking a tour of the school and seeing the haunted parts. There were 2 places that they would talk about: the 4th floor and the morgue in the basement. You can understand the morgue because, you know, dead people. So first day goes by, nothing special happened. Now 3 years later, I was in a film class and we set up a shoot for a video. It was late into the night. We're all joking that we're gonna catch something. About halfway through shooting, me and one of the actresses were talking, and we felt what we felt like was somebody blowing on our ears. We spun around, no one's there. We chalked it up to the wind. So we kept shooting, and we were moving set up, and we see a painting tilt that we already fixed. We go back there, and it's tilted again. So we fixed it again, and in the middle of one of the next takes, an actress begins screaming, saying that they've seen the photo move all on its own. Then we all heard footsteps coming up the staircase, and then down the hall again. One of the students took a quick photo, and you can see the outline of a black nun in the picture. If you all want to check the age of the school, it's Mount St. Mary's Catholic School, built in Oklahoma, built in 1903. I was 12 and staying at school in one of the largest dorm rooms. There are 8 of us in there. It's on a Wednesday night, and a usual one at that. We had all slept in that room for almost a year. It was our allocated room for the year. The school was actually a really old house set to being converted. Obviously, we're in the oldest part of the home, and our dorm was next to a music room with a piano. The only way to get to that room was through our room, so that's why we were all so on edge when it happened. Like I said, it was a normal Wednesday night. We all messed about until midnight after being put to bed at about 9 PM, but we were all asleep soon after. It wasn't until 2 AM that I was awoken by the guy next to me on the bunk over whispering in a voice to 1 or 2 other guys. After listening for a second, I realised he was talking about the noise that he could hear from the music room. It's a piano. It's being played at 2 AM. I jumped and yelped. It freaked me out. Not in a scared way, but sort of a, I'm freaked out because somebody's playing the piano in the middle of the night and I don't understand why. Now, at this point, we're all awake, listening to the piano he's talking about, all wanting to know who's playing. So we all got out of bed and got near the door. It was so clear that it was a piano at this point. We were more scared of being told off by the masters that would be playing it because we're all out of bed at such a late hour. We decided as a group we needed to know who it was, so we very slowly opened the door and pushed it open. So the light's off. So somebody flicked the switch quickly, pushed the door open so that we could confront them who was playing the piano. We find no one. The piano wasn't being played by anyone. The cover wasn't up. We didn't understand. We ran and woke up the Martin screaming what happened. She didn't believe us, and we all eventually got detention and sent back to bed. I can safely say that none of us slept well in that room for the rest of the year. It was all we could talk about and think about. This winter 2007 and 8 in mid-Missouri. I don't remember what month it was, but there was a little snow on the ground behind the bushes I ended up hiding in. It was definitely winterish. It was pitch black outside, so it's probably a new moon. I lived in a 3-story home with my mum and dad at the time. The first story. Being in a finished basement that I essentially lived in, almost never emerged from except for to sleep in my room on my 3rd floor. I was either always in the basement, or I was on the 3rd floor. And putting it lightly, I'm really glad I wasn't on the 3rd floor when this story went down. My dad was out of town on some kind of business trip. He's a doctor, so I'm honestly not sure what kind of trip it could have been. It's hazy, but that doesn't matter. The main thing is my mum and I were alone in the home, which is extremely rare. I was also a teenager and thought I was smart, so I convinced her to watch what was my favourite movie at the time, Saw 3, and my mum, bless her, is a tiny and often timid woman, so I knew we'd probably start watching in good sport but abort the mission. Still, I thought it'd be fun or funny or something. We live in a house in the woods. Now, of course I want to watch the movie in the basement instead of the living room. Not just because it's my habit. As I told her, a good horror movie deserves a good basement. The only way into our basement was behind a pretty hefty door just off a hall from the living room on the 1st floor. Basically, if you walked into my home, you normally wouldn't notice there was a basement door at all because it's off to the side. I say normally because in this case, there's a lot of saw noises coming from that door. As we're watching the film, really getting into it, I think I hear 3 people. Footsteps are hard to judge though. They just kind of march around, from what I heard, but what I heard was very short because as soon as I realised what was going on, I told my mum we had to get out. The basement had a back door, with lighting on the outside wall unfortunately. I was concerned about the lights when we were leaving. I remember being worried whoever was upstairs might be able to see us when we ran out, but I decided to not turn the light off, thinking it would be more obvious if that side of the home went dark before we ran out. It was around 11 PM I think, so total darkness except for the lights in the basement on the back wall of the home. Now the home next to us is empty and for sale, and the house on the opposite side could have been used for anything. It's on a hill. There's woods everywhere here. Point being, I got my mum and convinced her to run out into the dark and behind some bushes, but there was no one around to help us immediately. I call 911 the second we get behind the bushes alongside the home, but I remembered it went silent on the operator right before I could give her our address. She was saying something repeatedly while I had the phone in my hand pretending I wasn't there. I noticed the light around the basement exit get brighter, like somebody had opened the door. It turned out somebody had, and to the best of my ability, I counted 4 shadows absolutely tear out of the basement at top speed into the woods behind our home. As I told the cops when they got there, very rapidly, in full force, I thought I saw 4, but they rushed out so fast it could have been 3. Now this may have been a long story, but here's some points of what happened during this. Now, point 1 is that I always lock the door, even when my dad's not there. Point 2. While the front door had been closed after they came in, the back door of the basement had been left wide open, and our 2 dogs and 2 cats were outside when the cops got there. They're all inside pets who never go outside, so the second I saw my dog run up to me, I knew I hadn't been imagining things. Now point 3, and this is where I have to start filling in some blanks because I don't know everything. These people, 3 or 4 or however many, broke in through our front door. I heard them and managed to get the hell out while they stomped around. Point 4. I'm in the bushes with my mum. Maybe a minute later, I see the shadows race through the basement, then pass out into the woods. Now nothing in the home was misplaced or stolen, or even vaguely disturbed, even though there's expensive electronics in every room pretty much. Now point 6. This is the important one which the police, as much as I respected them, didn't understand why I was being so hysterical about. These people broke in through the front door. We blitzed out the back door, but as I said, the stairs to the basement are not obvious. More to the point, if they were gonna rob us, why would they care to find the basement if there's a living room with all the loot in it? In my estimation, they sought out the basement more to find us than to steal anything. Putting all these points together, I know a group of people broke through my front door, stomped around a little, paused to listen for the sound of people, heard the film, followed the sound of the door downstairs in search of us, surged down really quick, surveyed the basement and the room, saw a film playing and nobody around, and then surged out the back door. So what were they looking for? Why were they looking for people? Who were they? What happened to my home that night? The cops never searched the woods around us, but they did put a cruiser in front of our home for 2 nights, which was nice of them, but nothing ever come of it. But I struggled to sleep at night knowing that they're actually looking for us. And God, I'd hate to imagine what they would have done had they found us. I used to work at a security company with a bunch of friends. We all get along well. Most of us even hung out after work. The ones I didn't hang out with kept to themselves. There were 2 brothers that worked nights with me, and they were their own group. They were new to the company and would have conversations about their guns. Bill was like the older brother, Luke was younger. After hearing Luke and Bill talk about target shooting so much, I developed an interest. I didn't own a single firearm, but my roommate, he owned several. I mentioned at work one night that I was going shooting in the morning with my roommate, and I needed a place to go. Well, the 2 brothers pointed out a spot on Google Earth for me, and said it was great, and they've shot up there once before. The spot was 45 minutes away, and higher up in the mountains. I knew the spot precisely, due to a single image posted to the coordinates on Google Earth, with used shotgun shells covering the ground. I decided this was good a spot as any, and told my roommate Don to drive us. We arrived the next morning at 10 AM and parked at the top of the hill. We saw our spot about 150 yards away in a clearing down in the valley and began hiking down. On a quick side note, I wear this very bright neon yellow hooded sweatshirt at work and during winter. I'm also a pretty large guy. Being big and brightly coloured makes you very visible from far away. I've seen hunters using bright colours to avoid accidentally getting shot by others. I decide to wear my trademark bright hoodie on our little hike. So we made it about a quarter way down the hill, and I see a group of fellow target shooters at our desired spot. These were the only other people we'd seen in 30 minutes. Our spot is taken. Lame, I said. Now the second that I said lame, that's when everything went weird. We are on the side of a mountain, walking down towards them, and the rounds started flying. The group was shooting at us. Don and I were targets for about 3 guns. Worse, we didn't have immediate cover. I see Don running across the mountain. He starts laughing at the shooters. I see what the hell he was running for. There's a small plateau about 20 yards next to us. The sounds of bullets flying inches away from my ears is something that I'm never gonna forget. Movies don't do the sound justice. Not at all. I still get chills thinking about it now. The vibration and rotation of the bullets chilled my bones. It's not a sound I want to hear again. It made everything go slow motion and very clear. My adrenaline was kicking in. We made it to cover and hit the dirt. We're pinned down, but have cover. By the time that we've made it to the plateau, I've heard at least 100 rounds dip over us. I heard a pistol, a rifle, and a shotgun. I know I did. The trees, boulders, and mountainsides were being hammered with round after round. If we sat up from cover, we would have got shot in the face. These people were shooting up a hill, towards a road. They had their backs to their paper targets. Thinking back on it, my father said I should have yelled down to them to let them know that they're shooting at 2 people and to hold fire. But the thing is, I think they knew they were shooting us. How could they not? We weren't far from the mountain, and it was very bare. I didn't want to let them know they were getting close. I should have shot back. We had the high ground, but I'm not a killer. We just waited and listened for their footsteps and wanted them to stay where they were. If we were killed, no one would have found our bodies there. 15 minutes go by, the gunfire didn't let up, until it just ended. The mountain was quiet again. After 5 more minutes of silence, we checked down the hill. They're gone. We had our guns ready as we scanned the valley below. Nothing. No more guys. No vehicle. Just their garbage left behind. We decided this was a great time to get the hell out of the hills. We made it back to our car, and then to the home even faster. When I get back to work the next shift, I told everyone this. I even thanked Bill for some sweet advice. He apologised for the bad locals and said that's crazy. Another co-worker told me Bill and Luke went shooting it the same morning I did, in the same area. I asked Bill immediately about it. I said to him, "What guns did you bring to shoot?" He then pointed to the same Google Earth image as before. Luke, his friend, and Bill were using a Glock, a .22, and a 12-gauge shotgun. It all come together. I told him he was a psycho and almost killed us. He denied shooting at us and even changed his mind about where they were. He said he was actually 2 miles west because of his GPS. I knew he was lying. What could I do? I had no proof. He worked with me for another 2 years before I moved away and never heard of them again. I remembered how emotionless he was when he denied shooting at me. He was almost robotic. We never spoke of it again. I haven't gone shooting since.